Hello everyone and welcome to the Great Guild Wars 2 Countdown. Yes, we have moved to the pre-purchase timer. I will still do countdown episodes though after pre-purchase comes out. But let's face it, most of us watching are going to be playing when the pre-purchase comes out. So I thought it only fitting. Our topic for today is competitive PvP at level 1 I've got written. Because somebody left quite a cool comment on that original video about what he was excited about. Which I completely agree with. And that's this facet, this fact about PvP in Guild Wars 2 that I think at this point a lot of us are just, I personally am, I'm just taking it for granted, and it's easy to forget that in other MMOs they often don't do this, and that's that they're allowing you to go straight into PvP without having to do any grind or any prerequisite stuff at all. You go to the PvP hub and from there you have everything unlocked, your maximum power, and you are capable of acquiring anything you could possibly want, any equipment, any weapons, there it is, aside from skins, that is. So you can go straight into PvP fully ready to play, and even your default builds are put into a situation where really you're going to be quite effective, and I would hope as the game continued to go along, the developers would continue to update those default builds so that they were always something pretty nice. In Guild Wars 1 they tried to do something similar, but they quickly became outdated, which is a bit of a shame, but hopefully with Guild Wars 2, where everyone's continuing to work on it, it will stay that way. And this is really a massive thing. At so many other games, they'll force you to play through loads and loads and loads of stuff before you actually get to go and do the competitive PvP. In some ways, I think that there is a little bit of a downside with this competitive PvP thing. It does, despite the fact that this only occurs in one region of the world, it does take away, I think, a small sense of the progression while you're playing through a PvE character, because at some point you're going to go to the mists, right, just to check it out. And when you get that, you're going to see your health go up to like 12,000, and you're going to see all your stats super high. And to an extent, I would say that does take away a little bit in the PvE areas. Obviously, it goes straight back down when you go back to PvE, so there is still that reason to continue working and develop your character to its maximum potential. So really, it's not a very serious downside, and I just think really we should remember that Guild Wars 2 is letting us do this. They're letting us play competitive PvP straight away out of the gates. It's going to do a lot for the game's longevity. The game isn't launching as we wanted it to, with some kind of an observer mode, and people still are questioning the Conquest game type. However, thanks to this, at the very least, the game will continue to flourish, hopefully with PvP, and once observer mode does come out, hopefully we'll see it become truly something more e-sporty with Guild Wars 2. I mean, I think it is only thanks to this fact that everyone can still jump into PvP as soon as they want to that's going to keep it thriving. I think it's only down to this that wasn't the last nail in the coffin. I think we can maybe get away with not having an observer mode and maybe having some slightly off balance when the game launches because of this, and it really is an awesome thing that I'd like to see other MMOs starting to copy Guild Wars 2 with now, because honestly I think about other games now and it baffles me that I would be forced to play for hundreds of hours before I could actually go off and do the PvP. So yeah, you can find further reading in the description down below. Anyway, today I was going to do a server episode. As I say, I do want to get all the servers done, but you guys kind of blew me away. I love the comments on that last episode. It was really good. Everyone had lots of stuff to talk about, and I was just reading through. Usually it takes me a while to see some stuff that I want to pick up on and talk about, but just the list went on and on and on today. So the first comment that I found was the most thumbs up at the time. I thought had pretty much two different questions here. Came from Dr. Knuckle Sandwich, who said, "We already know that we see the ghost of King Adalbern. What do you think of the chances are of seeing Prince Rurick's ghost? Also, how about a spotlight on the brilliance that will be the server economy?" So first of all, I'll try and keep these short because, as I say, I've got quite a few here. I think it's unlikely we'll see Prince Rurick in Guild Wars 2. First, from a design standpoint, I think he was such an iconic an integral character to the Guild Wars 1 storyline that it would almost feel slightly cheap to put him into Guild Wars 2. Now, you might think that doesn't make any sense because those really integral, cool characters from the first game, it would be amazing to see them show up again in the second, but I think there is a threshold that you can cross with certain characters that really do have an impact on the players at some way, that there is a threshold there where once it's past it, it just wouldn't fit. I think of Prince Rurick and I think of Guild Wars 1. A lot of people, if you ask them what was the most moving or most significant moment of the Guild Wars 1 plot, or just ask them to recite generally what they remember about the plot, and it's Prince Rurick's death. I think 99% of the time that's what people remember. If they played through Prophecies and the other campaigns as well, it's Prince Rurick's death. I think that was kind of the peak for Guild Wars 1. Sadly, the plot went far beyond that, but I think people were still very much interested in the plot in Guild Wars 1, and at Prince Rurick's death, that was kind of the highlight for them, and a lot of people think of that, and to me, I think it would be slightly off to have him there in Guild Wars 2 in any major way. At the very least, he might have a small cameo somewhere, but as far as lore's concerned, Yes, we do get to see King Adalburn because of the fire and he's there in the catacombs and so on. But with Rurick, it's slightly different as far as a lore justification is concerned, because Rurick didn't die in the fire, which straight away means he's not going to be a permanent ghost like those guys are there. Now, that's not to say you can't become a ghost if you didn't die in the fire. Indeed, there were many ghosts in Guild Wars 1, and the fire hadn't even happened by Guild Wars 1's time. So there are a lot of ways to become a ghost in the Guild Wars universe. So there's actually a little bit of conflicting lore there, because some of the early lore written, it suggests that if you don't die in a heroic way or you never did anything significant, the soul can just be like trapped in the rotting body. But then there's other lore later that kind of suggests most people just end up going to an afterlife of some sort. But even then, Prince Rurick is still a special case because, and this is quite a big spoiler by the way, in case you don't want to know, skip forward like a minute. Rurick's quite a special case because he died on the Shiver Peaks, but then he was brought back to life by Vizier Kilbron, the Lich that found him, and he actually becomes a boss later on in the game. Right at the end of the game, you fight Prince Rurick as an undead again. Now, I mentioned this big spoiler, that was the other big thing people remember about Rurick that makes him so integral to the Guild Wars 1 plot. But I mentioned this again because after he had been silenced at that end moment of the game, the hero of the story, you, the player character, actually lets him find peace in the Hall of Heroes, and like the idea is he's sent to the Hall of Heroes, and the Hall of Heroes is like the pinnacle of the afterlife. It's the best place basically in the afterlife. Even the Norn believe in it to an extent. They call it like the Hall of Spirits, I believe is what they call it. So that's the Hall of Heroes, and that's kind of where Prince Rurick has gone to. And the Hall of Heroes falls to me kind of in the same category as the God Realms, in that I would expect it not to be so prominent in Guild Wars 2. However, because the Hall of Heroes exists in the mythos and the religions and stuff of so many other races in Guild Wars 2, I actually think that is a candidate for us to go back to. So if we ever do see Prince Rurick, for me, as a lore justification, it would have to be if there was some kind of gameplay reason why we went to the Hall of Heroes at some point. But just from a mechanics point and my personal opinion and what I think most people would agree with, I wouldn't really like to see Prince Rurick there. Not in any major way, at the very least. Anyway, about the brilliance that will be the server economy, I wanted to bring this up. I think it's okay. I'm not ranting and raving about it. I don't think it's amazing. But it is an interesting aspect of Guild Wars 2 that people might not be aware of. And it does tie quite a lot into some of the stuff they're doing with trade and things. So the idea here is, in most MMOs, you don't have an economy or an auction house that goes across every single server in the game necessarily. You usually have local economies, so they'll just be tied to each server. And this has got its pros and its cons. It can help certain servers develop an identity, I suppose. But with Guild Wars 2, they've just made it so the auction house runs across all servers. Now, that's partly because obviously guesting is going to be a heavy feature of Guild Wars 2, and you don't have to pay to swap servers, and swapping around servers is going to be somewhat more common in this game. So that necessitates the need, I guess. Necessitates the need, is that right? Well, that introduces the need more for a global economy in Guild Wars 2 rather than just a local one. But a lot of people really like the idea because basically, and you could go along a lot into depth here, you can really become economists and talk a lot about it, but basically makes everything overall a lot more fair in the game, and it helps ArenaNet to kind of centralize prices and see how things are going, and not one server, just because it's now inactive, isn't going to be screwed over because they've got really low amounts of certain materials that are in high demand and now all the prices are becoming inflated. That won't happen because it's a big global economy, which will be nice for the longevity of the game. I would say though that it does mean that certain servers do become less distinct, which will be a bit of a shame. And this also ties into some of the decisions that ArenaNet have made to do with allowing you to trade from the auction house pretty much anywhere, and also send mail and items to one another from pretty much anywhere without having to physically walk over to other in-game characters. And a lot of people like this idea because now it means you're not going to have massive groups of people just stood around in certain towns trying to sell stuff and just spamming chat constantly. But honestly, I wasn't that upset by the big groups of people, honestly, and I actually quite like that in MMOs. I like that you know that there's a place that you can go where there's going to be a thriving community. There's going to be a lot of people around. Your server might be super active, but it's nice to know that there's going to be at least one place where you can go that there's going to be a whole bunch of people that you can go and interact with them. I've talked before on Daily and in my various videos about Guild Wars 2 how I think the game needs a lot of ways for players to be able to interact with one another. Guild Wars 2 is making it very easy to be sociable and play alongside one another, but it's also not encouraging us to interact with one another that much, which is why I'm a big advocate of dueling and things like this in the game. And removing direct player-to-player trading is a big blow in that regard. It does mean that there are going to be a lot less occasions where you'll specifically go over and interact and play with other people. It does remove that a bit more, and that's something I am slightly concerned about, because in the betas I have felt like, even though there's a load of people around me, I'm not necessarily playing with them, I'm just playing alongside them, and that isn't that fun. So, I mean, it's interesting because some of these bad design decisions that have gone into other MMOs, like allowing people to kill still and camp mobs and stuff, even though they're all frustrating things that none of us like, it's interesting because at the same time it does force you to sit up and take notice of the people around you. While in Guild Wars 2, it's almost getting to the point for me, I feel like, where it's like, a lot of the times I may as well not even be playing an MMO. They're just people running around, and some people aren't as sociable as I'd like them to be. I'm always super sociable and talking to people and like, hey, how's it going? But sometimes you just don't get a response, and they may as well not be there. This whole removal of direct player-to-player trading is affecting things like that. I mean, the main other thing a lot of people were complaining about and upset with in that regard is you can't specifically trade item to item to people, because you can't trade via mail. You can just offer things to people, and people are worried maybe scamming will become a little bit more prominent. But at the same time, because of having this global economy, also hacking will be much less frequent. I mean, hacking for profit anyway. People could hack just because they find it fun still, but that incentive to do it now is weakened. So there's pros and cons. Generally, I'm for the global server economy, don't get me wrong. I just think it is a little bit of a shame we've lost this other way to go and interact with people, and the fact these massive groups won't appear. I mean, if you were someone that always got low FPS in certain areas of certain games because of that, then hey, maybe you'll be happy with this too. It's an interesting topic though, it really is, and I haven't mentioned it on Daily, so I thought I would at least once. And the next question was from Binage, who said, I've got a lore question that I was going to try and raise with the developers next beta weekend event, but if you can answer it here, then that would make things simpler. Do waypoints exist in the game world, or are they purely a convenience? This has been quite a difference of opinion on this, and some harsh words spoken on both sides. Are you able to give a definitive answer? No, we're not. Well, as far as I'm aware, maybe when we get to the Asuran areas, we will. It very much seems to be the idea that these are Asuran inventions, so they very much could be a part of the in-game world, but this is really murky territory, and it's murky territory in that ArenaNet might have the odd line or two out there in the game or in the lore that establishes that waypoints do exist, and that this technology or this ability for characters to just teleport all around the world does exist in the lore, but they will shy away from elaborating on it or talking about it too much, because at the end of the day it's just a justification in the lore for a game mechanic, and it always gets a bit weird when you come to game mechanics like that. Guild Wars 1, this was a topic I came up with a lot and talked about a fair bit while we were still LPing Guild Wars 1. It's funny because in Guild Wars 1 they had so much weirdness about the map. Guild Wars 1 basically had the same kind of thing. You could just teleport all around. You could just map travel from place to place to place. And early in the game they tried to establish that this map travel thing was an invention that was created by certain people. And then as the game's lifespan went on, they shied away from it. And then by the end, there were all these references, like in the Warring Criter, that characters, you were the only person, the player character was the only one that seemed to be able to activate or use this invention. Other people were limited by foot travel or using a surrogate. It just got really weird, and it was never fully explained, and I don't expect it to be fully explained in Guild Wars 2 either. This is one of those situations where, and I don't like it when things do it this much, but this is one of those places where I'd say, what do you want? Do you want this to be something that exists in lore, where you can say, right, everyone has the capability of just teleporting around all the place, and you make up your own reasons for as to why certain characters aren't doing that, why surrogates do exist in lore? Why do they exist if everyone can just teleport from waypoint to waypoint? It wouldn't make much sense. So you can say to yourself, if you want, if you think that can make sense and you can have it make sense in your own head, then by all means believe waypoints do actually exist in the in-game world, and I'm sure we'll find, as I say, a reference to it here or there. But if you think it's nonsensical, I wouldn't worry about it, because ArenaNet aren't going to spend, they're certainly not going to worry about trying to justify it. I'm sure they won't. If they do, I'll be surprised. I'll be very happy to see how they work it out. But it's a bit paradoxical, and I wouldn't worry about it. Honestly, just don't worry about it that much. Just go with what you think is most fun and enjoy the game. Just enjoy the fact that there's mechanics here, and ArenaNet aren't removing what is, in some people's opinions, an essential mechanic for Guild Wars 2 because of lore. I mean, let's just be thankful they've not done that, because some developers would do that. The last question is from Vanilla God, who said, Ola, I've got a question for you about your idea. Oh, don't say Ola. That reminds me of doing bloody different language intros, which I've been forgetting to do recently. We will go back to that eventually, by the way. I had a question about your idea that the gods will never be involved in the game because it's not human-centric anymore. Don't you think that could happen, that the gods became major antagonists at some point in the game? How about this stone that you said in a previous episode gave the humans magic? It was in the gods' interest to split up for power reasons. If a goal of the races is to fix, they wouldn't start to interfere. Greetings and keep up the good work. Well, I wanted to mention this because I don't actually believe the human gods will never have a part in the Guild Wars 2 story. I think that they do have a massive part in the Guild Wars 2 story. They are an enigma. They were never fully explained in Guild Wars 1, and they were deliberately not fully explained in Guild Wars 1. There's definitely a lot of lore to do with them that is still behind the curtains, and a lot very interesting going on. They had this exodus. They have left. They've left even, further than they'd left in the original exodus during the events of Nightfall. There's a lot going on with the gods, and a lot of people are curious about it. It's one of those massive things that everyone is really, really interested in. They had a lot of hints in Guild Wars 1 about stuff to do with the gods. One of the last quests that was added in Eye of the North, when ArenaNet knew what they wanted to do for Guild Wars 2, was this massive long hunt about the human gods and how facets of the human gods looked like dragons, like elder dragons, and just all this kind of crazy stuff that they were establishing, and they knew that they would eventually pick back up in the Guild Wars 2 story. So we will see it eventually. I just don't think we're going to have something massively focused on the gods. It's interesting to see how they'll sort it out, because I would want something massively focused on the gods, but at the same time they can't quite do that unless they somehow work into the story that the gods are relevant for every race, which will be curious. I think that would be quite a nice thing to do, though, if they did have written in the lore that the gods were super important to the Char, but at the same time they've got the Char don't believe in gods, as we all know, and the Char deliberately distance themselves from the gods. That could be an interesting story direction, that now the Char have to figure out that they hate these gods, or they don't want to have anything to do with these gods, but it's actually been established in the lore that there is a connection there somewhere, and it's kind of how the Char deal with that. That could be an interesting story to go down. I do think that they will go back to the gods, and like what you mentioned here with the Bloodstone as well could be very good. That's some of the earliest Guild Wars 1 lore. The idea of the Keystone, this idea that you have this part of the Bloodstone that could then essentially unlock it all once again and give all magic back to everyone and create chaos, as it did when Abaddon first gave magic out in the first instance. This was written and established a long time ago, but nothing's ever come of that keystone. It's just lore that's there, and that's very much to do with the human gods too. It's to do with the magic that the human gods gave us. So there's a lot to do with the human gods. Don't get me wrong, I don't think for a while in Guild Wars 2 we'll be seeing much to do with human gods, because it's not about them anymore. It's not about humans, but the gods will play a role at some point. They certainly will. There's too much that's been established to do with them for them to abandon the plotline now. Anyway, there you go, guys. That was Guild Wars 2 Daily. The footage in the background was once again from the Sparrow's journey. For the last time, I'll move on to someone else. If you've got any footage you would like to appear on Guild Wars 2 Daily, maybe boost your own channel a little bit, let me know. You can send me a message on Twitter or a personal message, and that's totally fine, and I'll put you on the list. Thanks very much for watching, guys. As I say, really cool with the comments. Keep them up, and I guess I will see you tomorrow for more random goodness. Probably servers tomorrow, because I didn't want to carry on with that. Anyway, thanks very much, guys. I'll see you tomorrow.